Welcome to episode 9 of Taking Inventory. I'm Daniel Druger with my co-host James Barrow, and today we have a very special guest that we're excited to welcome on the podcast, Kenan Saleh, who's the general manager at Lyft Media. Kenan joined Lyft in 2019 after the company acquired the company he co-founded called Halo when Kenan was just 21 years old. Since then, he's grown Lyft's advertising business from $0 to over $10 million and still growing. Kenan is also a Forbes 30 under 30 and is an active investor running a syndicate where he's involved in over 30 companies. Kenan, welcome to the podcast. Super excited to have you.
Thank you guys so much. Excited to be here.
Awesome. Why don't we start? You've accomplished so much in just a short period of time. Give us a little bit more about your background, what Halo was, how you started it, and everything kind of leading up to Lyft.
Yeah. So my background getting into advertising and tech was I didn't have any prior experience in advertising, and I founded this company in college. So I was a college student, and I took more of an entrepreneurial angle where I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur, and I was looking at industries where I thought I could build interesting things that would be impactful and could create a lot of value. And the way I got into advertising was I studied business and computer science in college. One of my classes that I took, which was very influential, was a marketing class. And it was about digital marketing. And it basically talked about the history of digital marketing from the early 2000s at the beginning of the internet all the way until today, and all the way to Facebook, Google, the ad industry as we know it today. And it went through the history of all the progression and all of the advancements in tech and data that have allowed that industry to thrive and how quickly it had grown. So the initial idea we talked about the digital advertising industry and how quickly it had grown and all the innovations there. And then they were talking about the other sectors of the advertising industry. And they talked about out of home. They mentioned it kind of like briefly. And the insight initially was that industry, the out of home sector of advertising, which was billboards and taxi ads and subway ads and all these things you see outside, had not innovated at all. Actually, it was older than digital marketing. It had been around for hundreds of years, but it had not grown as quickly. It had not innovated. There was no tech and data being used. And that was the idea. The idea was, can we take some of the advancements from the digital marketing world, apply them to the out-of-home marketing world? And then my co-founder as well, he had more of a traditional background in advertising. He had worked 4 years at Google on digital ads, and he brought some of those thoughts and insights and some of the background as well. So we teamed up together to start this, and that's how we started with Halo. We started up as like a college kind of project, and then it morphed into a company, and we took it full time. We left school, we raised money, and then eventually we sold to Lyft. But that was the genesis of the story.
Crazy. And how much did you raise for it? Did you drop out of school? Did you end up finishing school? And what would you have done if this didn't work? Were you going to become a doctor or something?
Well, so actually I had signed an offer I'd done an internship in consulting, and then I actually had signed an offer to return full time. But I came back to college and I was like, I felt fine about it, but I wasn't really that passionate, and I really wanted to be an entrepreneur. So when I came back to school, I started working on different things, and Halo was the one that ended up doing really well. And then we got very excited about it, got traction. And so I started this during my senior year. I technically signed an offer to start at the end of when I graduated at a company, but we were working on this while I was in school, and I didn't know if it was going to be a company, so it was it started off as something that was small, might work, might not work. So I didn't cancel my job offer or anything, but as we started working on it more and more, it got more traction, and I realized this was going to be a thing. So after I graduated, I actually did graduate, but the day after I graduated, we raised our pre-seed round. We were actually raising during graduation. It was a crazy time period, but then the day after is when we closed the round, and then we moved to New York, and then I told them I'm not coming to this job. And then my co-founders dropped out. So they were in the middle of schooling. I was right at the end. So I graduated and then took it, and then co-founders dropped out.
Crazy. And then when you started it, so did you go out and you buy screens? Tell listeners how'd you get your first set of inventory? What was that process like?
Exactly. So step one was we created basically an MVP. We tried to think of what is the microcosm of this product, the minimum viable version of this that could prove out the model. So what that meant for us is, if you think about what our business was, so I was talking about out-of-home advertising, and then we ended up deciding on sort of transportation and rideshare as this very interesting wedge into out-of-home, because the taxi advertising had existed for 20, 30, it's actually had been around for a very long time, but it was always static ads, and mostly in New York, because New York and then a few other markets where they had big taxi fleets. But what we realized is that one, the rideshare fleets over the last few years had grown massively and actually were larger than the taxi fleets and in more cities. So it was like a much larger network. And we also saw the opportunity that we need to turn these from static to digital. That was the second thing. Turn the static screens to digital screens. Then you can do stuff with targeting. You can do stuff with measurement. You can do interesting ad serving, different types of ad serving and pacing. And you can just do all sorts of interesting stuff when you go from analog to digital. So that was where we landed on this rideshare advertising idea. And then we did the smallest possible microcosm. This was like a marketplace. So we got both sides of the marketplace. We got supply, which was drivers. We had one driver to start, and then we bought one screen to go on one driver. And then demand, which were advertisers. And our first advertiser was a local coffee shop that we went to. And we did it for free. We just said, we don't even know if it's going to work, but just we'll show your ads on this car, and then it's going to drive around. And then the first test that we did was we did a couple. So first we advertised this coffee shop, and then we tracked where the car was driving and showing the ads. And then we overlaid that with where they were getting search hits from on Google. They had an AdWords campaign, and you can see which zip codes. And our pitch deck basically showed, we just overlaid these two charts. And they basically mapped up like one-to-one. Where the driver drove, you saw an uptick in search volume. And that was the case, basically. Like this worked with one. We showed this one ad and look at the impact that it had. And then we used that we raised a little bit, like a grant from the university that we like entered that into a sort of a pitch contest. And then we got $10,000. We used that to buy a few more. We went from 1 to 5. And then we got our first actual paying customers, not a free. And then we used the data from that to go raise a pre-seed round. And then we used the pre-seed round to buy a lot, move to New York. And that's when everything started. It became a real company, and we really kicked off from there.
And then, we'll get to kind of how you started talking to Lyft, but even before then, like what was the longer vision? You mentioned measurement, which obviously we've had Andrew Cavato, who we interviewed a few weeks ago, who talked really heavily about measurement and why it's so challenging. But you mentioned that, but like what else was kind of the vision for the company if you just continued to invest and grow that business? What was the end vision?
Yeah, the idea was that we thought this could be the mission here was to kind of revolutionize the out-of-home industry. And we thought rideshare and transit would be the start. So we started off with sort of like advertisement on top of the car, and then we expanded to inside the car as well. And then we were looking at other areas of out-of-home that could have been interesting and layering in sort of like on the street, maybe even like some billboard type stuff, and really just like become a fully comprehensive out-of-home media company. And we were, so when we were as a startup, we were less married to transportation. That's where we started, but we thought maybe we can go outside. But then once we joined Lyft, we actually focused more on transportation because that's Lyft's core business. And then at Lyft, we went in we went more into transportation. Whereas when we started, we would have been open to go more towards the out of home. And we thought maybe in the future there could even be like stuff on the street, on billboards. Like we thought we could expand into some of those other things as well. But we went a different way once we were with Lyft, which was the right decision at the time.
And so how did the conversation with Lyft come about? And then walk us through a little bit on the acquisition and you stepping into the role you're in today.
Yeah, they reached out to us. We didn't think that anybody would be interested in what we were doing that early on. And we had just gotten started. So we had raised a small round of funding, and we had launched in New York, and we had a decent sized fleet in New York. And this was in addition to, we had Philadelphia as well, because that's where we started. That's where we went to school. And that's where our initial pilots were. And then we had just started launching Chicago. So we were just in a few markets. We were starting to get our first paid advertisers, which were like at the time it was like like 10,000 and tens of thousands of dollars in MRR, which was very big for us at the time. And so we had really just started, but we had some press, and we were in Forbes, we were in a few other things. And then somebody from Lyft reached out, probably because they heard about it. There was a little bit of good fortune and good timing. They basically reached out saying, hey, we've been thinking about this space, and we've been looking at the rideshare advertising and the advertising space in general for a bit. And we think we want to do something here. And you guys just launched, and we heard about you, and it looks like you're doing something interesting here. Let's meet. That's how it started. And then very quickly, it just escalated into it started off as a sort of get to know each other, and then maybe like a partnership, like maybe we could run a pilot together. And then it quickly over like, 5-6 calls in a couple months, it just moved to a M&A discussion. And they just told us, actually, yeah, like we keep going deeper into this, and we're very serious about this. We want to make a real swing here. We don't want to do a pilot. We want to build it. and we want you guys to come build it here. And that's when everything just turned into an M&A discussion.
It's awesome. It's very cool. I guess given that, like when you're now at a company where Snapchat, like in reality, the only way we monetized was via ads. So like our jobs are pretty straightforward. Like for you, what's it like building an ads business within an organization where ads aren't the primary kind of driver? Like, and you have all these different stakeholders and all these different services. Like, have you found any is there anything kind of interesting kind of takeaway about how you kind of can navigate that? And also like, are there points of leverage given that like you guys have a diversified business?
Yeah, actually, it's a very interesting point. And I'm glad you asked that because this is a little bit of a tension that exists in all retail media networks or commerce media networks, which is that it always starts off, it's not the primary revenue source, it's adjacent. And the reason why everybody likes it is because it's high margin adjacent revenue. So it's oftentimes a smaller percentage of top line, but a larger percentage of bottom line. But it takes time to ramp up to that. So it's like there's one challenge, which is with any non-core business, which is that it doesn't get as much attention as the core. And I think that's a challenge for not even specific to advertising, but anytime you have a company that's investing into non-core businesses, that it needs to prove itself. And there's always a tension between investing more in your core business versus investing in growth stuff. And then the other extra tension is that for advertising, they can sometimes conflict with the core revenue stream. So for us, like when our main revenue source is people paying for their rides. And, we track things like conversion, retention extremely closely because those are some of the core success metrics for the business. And if advertising ever gets in the way of that, like by showing, advertising is getting in the way of people converting or it's lowering retention, then you're cannibalizing the business, and that's going to be a tension point. And that's the same, I think, for every advertising business, but it's exaggerated. The concern's exaggerated in any retail media or commerce media business because it's not the only way that you make money. So yeah, we had some tensions there, and this is common. Like I remember when I talked to some people early when we were getting started, I talked to the Amazon ads team and I asked them what was it like for you guys getting started. And they said, yeah, it was the same kind of challenge where at first they were saying that people didn't even really want to say that they were doing ads. It was kind of like a sticky or like a kind of gross thing that they were like I don't know if we want to tell people that we're doing ads, and they kind of kept it quiet. And it took time for them to build trust with the organization, and then for the organization to really accept that yes, we have an ads business and we show ads, and that's fine. And we went through the same process at Lyft. When we first started, everyone was very hesitant of like, do we really want to be saying we do ads, and how upfront do we want to be with everyone about this, and should we be proud of showing ads? And then over time, we've been able to shift the organization's perspective of this, is that it's not about gross ads that are getting in the way. It's about relevant, tasteful things, and these can really improve our bottom line without hurting the customer experience. And it takes time for the organization to become comfortable with that, which is we saw that exact same process over the last few years.
Even within the ads business, I mean, you're in a unique position because you guys have so many different services that you've talked about out of home, within the rides, some of the bike shares or physical ride shares, some of the billboards. What are the services you have, and how do you even navigate that? That these are digital, but they're also physical.
Yeah, so we kind of divide our portfolio between out of home and then digital. Out of home advertising products, digital advertising products. For us, we have 4 main products. On the out of home side, it's on-car advertising. So this is actually like where we started with Halo, which is the digital screens that are on top of our drivers' vehicles. And then we also have bike share advertising. So Lyft, people don't know this, Lyft operates the largest bike share network in the country, which includes City Bike in New York, Divvy Bike in Chicago, Bay Wheels in the Bay Area. Lyft owns and operates all of those networks, and those have ads on the stations. There's ad panels, and then we also wrap the docks. Those are static today, and those are becoming digitized. So that's kind of on the card, on the street, which is out of home because it's one to many. And these are, outside of the home. And these are like core one to many, high reach advertising products. And the digital side of the portfolio are in-car screens. These are inside the vehicle, one-to-one with the rider, and then our in-app advertising, which is in the rider app. And these are digital because it's one-to-one, and you know who is on the other side of this. We know who they are. They have a rider profile with us. We have data, and you can use that for targeting and measurement. So that is the whole portfolio. It's on the car, on the street, in the car, and in the app. It kind of spans throughout the transportation journey, and then it spans across out of home and digital.
And, when it comes to the drivers in particular, it's just, like, again, in the case of Snapchat, we, for most part, it was pretty easy for us to go to monetize basically user generated content. There was really no rev share there. As we started getting into more influencers and Discover, the rev share became kind of an important part. Like, do you guys have that same sort of dynamic with drivers? Like, are drivers kind of your influencers? Do they monetize the ads as well? Like, how does that relationship and tension work?
Yeah, so we rev share for our products that are on drivers' vehicles. We rev share with the drivers. So for on-car and in-car, since those are on the drivers' vehicles themselves, they get a cut of the ad revenue that we bring in. So it's like full marketplace. There's demand coming in, and then some of that is shared with our supply base, which is our drivers, and then we keep some of that.
And have you found there's been education necessary with those drivers? Or almost is this the reverse, right? Is this kind of a retention tool that they can monetize beyond just the drives themselves?
It's actually been very easy for us. For drivers, the number one, separate from advertising, the number one desire from drivers is earnings. That's like the number one thing that they care about on the platform. And this is a way for them to earn extra without doing extra work, which is a very compelling value proposition for most drivers. I drive the same amount of time and I drive the same routes. But with putting these screens either inside my vehicle or on top of my vehicle, I'm going to earn extra. And in many cases, it can be significant. It can be like a 10, 20+% income boost for these drivers, especially if you're full time, because the way it works is that you get paid more the more you drive. So it's very compelling for drivers, and it solves one of their core need, their main core need. And so we've had no real issue scaling these, and there's a lot of demand for them in most of our markets. Now, some people, it's not for every driver, especially if you're a part-time driver, it's not going to make a lot of sense because you're not going to be using it enough in order to make extra money, and we wouldn't actually give it to that kind of driver because it's not going to make sense for us either. Some drivers, maybe they don't like it just because they don't want to put it on their car. That happens, but there's a lot of drivers who view this as a way to make extra money, and they're totally fine with that. It hasn't been a major issue for us.
As you're building the business with such a diverse portfolio, how do you look at brand advertisers versus performance advertisers and the products that you need to build for them? Measurement is a big one, but there's a whole slew of products that those types of advertisers require. So how do you approach that?
Yeah, I would say that oftentimes our products appeal to different audiences. So our out-of-home products appeal mostly to brand advertisers, whereas our digital products, the main customer, we do have brand advertisers that spend on them, but the main customers, or at least increasingly, are performance advertisers. So part of it is like the products are targeting different segments of the customer base. And then the roadmaps for each product will be built for that customer base. So you have some separation where like our in-app roadmap is very performance-based, whereas our on-car roadmap is more brand-based. So they're targeting different customers and they can build for those needs. And for us, though, the other thing we've noticed, though, is that all advertisers are starting to care about measurement. There used to be more of a distinction between brand advertisers just cared about reach and then performance advertisers just cared about performance. But we're seeing more brand advertisers expect and want to see performance metrics and more scrutiny from their teams of showing performance for the brand dollars even. So really, we're starting to we're building kind of measurement products for all customers, not just for brand anymore, not just for performance anymore, also for the brand advertisers. So that's like the short of it, is that they have different needs and they are different customers, but everybody wants measurement. So when we build these products, we try to build them for both customers.
Awesome. And I guess even maybe, this is just, we kind of asked this question when most of these interviews, but and this could be with inside Lyft or not, like what are you just like most excited about, generally speaking, when it comes to like advertising, marketing, kind of like the opportunities ahead? Like, is there something that you're just like when your team right now is just like fired up about, that like you think people should be thinking about?
We're very excited about retail media, and we even really call it commerce media because we think the definition is expanding beyond traditional retail. And I think that's where it started with the Amazon ads and everyone, but it's expanded to include much more. And we would consider ourselves a commerce media, not retail media. And other companies like Marriott and airlines, I think they would also be considered commerce media. But we're very excited about that category because the first reason is I think it has actually the best attribution because it has end-to-end measurement within the ecosystem. And I actually think it has the strongest attribution of any type of advertising channel. And advertising in general, I think, has always been a little bit shaky on attribution. The big wave of why digital grew and blew up over the last 10, 20 years was because there was much stronger attribution than TV and radio and all the stuff before it. But even digital attribution, if you go deep into it, you can find it can be a little bit shaky at times in terms of tracking a purchase to a particular ad, especially when you're showing multiple ads to a consumer. And then you get into all sorts of mixed marketing models and things that are like, if you go deep into them, they're not always perfectly robust. Whereas retail media is actually a lot cleaner in terms of measuring the end-to-end conversion because it happens within that ecosystem and oftentimes on the same session. Or if it's on a different session, it'll oftentimes come back to the same platform at least. So I think retail media is very exciting, or commerce media is very exciting. And we're starting to see the push is now less about attribution because the attribution is pretty strong. It's more about incrementality of, yes, these are, I can attribute these purchases to this ad spend well, but with some of those purchases had happened anyway. And Amazon, other companies are doing really good work to build tools that will allow you to measure incrementality, which is something that most retail media companies don't do, or most retail media platforms don't do today. So I think that's the direction that's going. And so I'm excited about it. I think retail media will continue. I know it's basically the hot topic right now, and it's all the rage, and it's growing very quickly. I think it'll continue to do so over the next 5-10 years.
So with that in mind, kind of, we like to ask kind of all the guests, like, if you do fast forward 5 years, what does the ad ecosystem, commerce media, what does it look like? And then putting you a little bit on the spot, who do you think wins and who loses in that new dynamic?
I think who wins are the platforms that have the best attribution. And I would level that up to my previous comment is the platforms who can show the best attribution with incrementality. So, and being able to measure incrementality by default and not having to set up your own complicated A/B tests on the advertiser side to measure it, but having incrementality built into the actual ad platforms where they can run the A/B test and they can show you incremental metrics or incrementality metrics on their own. That is, I think, going to be expected in the future. But really, at the highest level, everyone is pushing for better performance measurement, and they want to be able to show that this is ROI positive and we should continue to invest in it. That's just the growing trend across advertising is more and more scrutiny is being put on the dollars, and we need more and more substantiation and clear measurement of is the value or is the money that we're spending here worth it. So the platforms that do that well are going to continue to dominate and growth in the ad ecosystem. So that's why I think retail media is poised really well, because the attribution tracking is great. And then you can also start to measure incrementality very well also. But I also think that like the Facebook, Googles will also continue to do well for that reason. Whereas maybe, linear TV, radio, I don't know how well some of those are going to do. And a lot of those, I also see opportunity though within those realms to move towards stronger attribution within those older industries. For example, like linear TV, the move from linear TV to CTV was a huge step forward in that. I think from analog radio to digital radio, and even podcasts, which is not radio, but it's sort of adjacent, those have a lot stronger attribution. So those industries are innovating in themselves to get better at it. So I think that will help kind of counteract some of these forces. But that's what I would say.
Cool. Well, Kenan, this was awesome. Really appreciate you coming on the podcast today, kind of talking us through your story and what things are going to look like in the future. I guess for everyone listening, where can people follow you or get in touch or learn more?
Yeah, people can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Kenan H. Saleh, or on LinkedIn. Kenan Saleh is my name. And then if they want to reach out for anything Lyft related, you can reach out to me on Twitter or LinkedIn. You can also email us advertising@lyft.com, and that will go straight to our team. If you're interested in anything on the demand side, partnership side, supply side, anything, you can reach out there.
Fantastic. Well, thanks again for coming on the podcast today. Really excited to have you on. So thank you.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.